Alright, so I bought this WJ a few months ago and drove it for a couple months. Everything seemed alright, and then it developed a head gasket leak. So I've been working on it here for a few weeks, and I got my head gasket fixed. I had my engine tore down, took both the heads off, replaced the head gasket, got all that stuff, taken care of. That's where we're at right now. So I got both the heads back on, new head gaskets in there. And so the next thing that I got to do to put this thing back together is put the timing chains back on. This is a Grand Cherokee. It's a 2004 Grand Cherokee WJ with the 4.7 HO, which is a overhead cam engine. So it's got two camshafts up here, one on either side, and it has three timing chains actually. I got some rags in there right now because I didn't want to drop anything down into the oil pan. A couple gears that go on the main timing chain here, from the crankshaft to the idler sprocket, and then from there there's a couple additional chains, one that goes up to each of the camshafts, which is what moves opens your intake and exhaust valves. So, like I said, I got it all torn apart, replaced my head gaskets, got those back on just recently, and so now, next step to put this thing back together and get it going again is to do the timing chains. I bought all new timing chains and timing chain guides and everything for it as well. So I'm going to get all my parts together and get this, try and get this timing chain put back on. Got the new timing chain here, all the parts I need. So a new chain, comes with the secondary, primary chains. That's about what it's going to look like when it's put back together. And then, we got new guides, our tensioners guides, and these are new hydraulic chain tensioners. So should have everything I need to get this thing put back together. Well, I unfortunately didn't get very far on that. I was putting the primary chain tensioner on. The instructions say to put the bolts in, and over on the other side, and torque them to 250 inch-pounds, which is right around 20 foot-pounds. And well, using my torque wrench set to 20 foot-pounds, had a little problem with the bolts. So I don't know if my torque wrench is inaccurate or if these bolts were exceptionally weak, because it didn't take a lot of force to do that. That bolt you can see is stretched, and that one snapped off. But I was lucky, and it wasn't snapped off completely. There was still a little piece connecting this, and when I backed this out, this piece came out with it. So that means that couldn't have been tightened in there very far or very strong. So not entirely sure why these snapped, possibly because it's got over 150,000 miles on it, and these might be the originals, and I don't know, time, heat, whatever made these bolts not as strong as they're supposed to be. So that kind of put a damper in that. I had to get some new bolts, wait for those, because I looked up the part number for these with Chrysler, and the bolt is a discontinued, which, okay, how do you discontinue a bolt, right? But luckily they had the size of the bolt. It's a M8 by 1.25 by 60 millimeter. And so I was able to find somewhere else that had bolts of that size. And so these are, I think they're metric, 10.9, which is, from what I understand, roughly equivalent to a grade 8 bolt, whereas the originals were 9.8, which is about a grade 5 bolt. So these should be stronger. Hex size, a little bigger. The originals were 10, these are 13. And not quite as many threads on these, but you can see this little bit of grease on there. I already ran this in to make sure it would fit, and that was with it like bottoming out on the oil pump, so there's still plenty of thread there. Should work just fine. And I don't think I'll have a clearance problem with the head either, because the size of the flange is the same, so it's just the head, and I don't think there's anything that, you know, would be getting in the way of that. So I'm gonna put that back together and see how it goes. So since I broke the original bolts, I'm a little leery about putting too much pressure on these, but they shouldn't be a problem because these are a lot stronger bolts. Just to be sure, I first tightened them with my small torque wrench. It's a 1/4 inch. I got a 3/8 adapter on it, but that only goes up to 200 inch-pounds, and these are supposed to be torqued to 250 inch-pounds. So I torqued them to 200 using that, and then I switched to my 3/8, and I have it set just below 21 foot-pounds, because 250 inch-pounds is just less than 21. 21 foot-pounds would be 252 inch-pounds. So should be really close at, you know, between 20 and 21 there. And if I can get this wrench on, there we go. And we'll torque them down. There we go. And that's not a lot of torque. Like this little bit that I'm putting just to get to that point is all it took to break those originals. So there was something not right with those bolts. But there we go. My instructions say next step, right side chain tensioner. There's a Torx bolt. I don't remember the size. I'll find out in a second. That holds that in, and it also says to apply Mopar lock and seal. I don't know if this is any different than regular Loctite, but I went and ordered the authentic stuff. It was just a few bucks off Amazon. So anyway, put that on the bolt. Bolt goes in. Put the chain guide in, etc. So gonna get that in there now. So that Torx bolt's a T35, and you can see I got my Torx end in there, and I'm just using a 1/4 inch socket here because the little magnetic extension that came with like this Torx bolt set is not super strong, so I just got a 1/4 inch socket on it there. You just got to be careful when you take that out that you don't drop that Torx bit out, because you know it'll fall down and can end up in your oil pan if you don't if you're not careful, and you don't want that. Torque specs for this is 150 inch-pounds. And so before I did that, I was just thinking, I'm used to using, you know, a bigger torque wrench on a lot of things, you know, when I'm doing like lug nuts and things at 100 foot-pounds. But these smaller torques, I like to know what it's going to feel like when the torque wrench gets to that point. And so what I've been doing is I've been testing. I got an adapter on my torque wrench that adapts it from 1/4 to 3/8 up to half. And then I can test this on my lug nuts, because I know my lug nuts are way past the torque I need. I need 150 inch-pounds here, and the lug nuts are 100 foot-pounds, so I'm not going to get anywhere near that. But what this will do is it'll let me feel what the wrench is going to feel like when it gets to that point. And so if I'm not exactly sure what I'm feeling for, just to make sure I don't over-torque things, so right there, you can kind of hear it click and see it move a little bit. And so now I know, okay, that's what I need to be feeling for when I torque this thing down. Because you definitely don't want to over torque these. It's an aluminum cylinder head. My light's getting in my way. Right there. That's it. And I almost didn't pay attention to my own advice and almost dropped that bit. But I got it. zip ties just to hold them on. And I'm just using a magnet on the end of a wire here. Alright, so I got the timing chain back in, sprockets on, torque down, guides in place, secondary chain tensioners in place. Everything is looking good. And so the final check, which I just did, is rotate the engine 2 full turns and then check to make sure everything's lined up. So 2 full turns will actually be 1 turn of the idler pulley. 2 full turns, they're counting on the crankshaft. So 1 turn of this brings this around halfway, and then the 2nd turn brings it back up to the top. And so then what you're supposed to check is make sure that that's still at 12, the thing at the bottom's at 6, each of these, the V8, is still at 12. And from what I can tell, everything looks good. So I think the timing chain is in and good. Just got to smear a little oil on there and then put the cover back on next.